Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Christopher Smith, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Dean of Student Services at the University of Arkansas Hope Texarkana. Today, for our UAHT Together lecture series, we will be highlighting and celebrating Pride Month for the month of June, and we have a very special guest. Mr. Mark Vaughn is a licensed professional counselor and alumni of Texas A&M Texarkana. Mark, we will not hold that against you because, Hope UAHT has a Texarkana campus, but we won't hold that against you because of that. But more so, Mark serves on the board of Equality Texarkana, an organization here in Texarkana, Arkansas, that works with and assists individuals within the LGBTQ community. And so we will turn it over to Mark. And then afterwards, if there are any questions that individuals would like to ask directly or place within the chat, we will address those afterwards. So let us please give a warm UAHT Together welcome to Mr. Mark Vaughn.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, can you see me?
No, we can't.
Okay, let me try that one. Okay, that just took me out of me seeing. Can you see me now?
Still no.
Okay, I'm very sorry. I don't know how to do this. Zoom is not my normal one. DoxyMe is the service we use. My name is Mark Vaughn. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I have dealt with LGBTQ issues all through my professional career. It's a fact that LGBTQ people suffer from greater rates of depression, anxiety, and substance abuse than their cisgendered heteronormative counterparts. And this kind of creates a problem that has to be addressed. And it's especially acute in college settings because frequently this is the time that kids are moving out of the home and actually coming to terms with their sexuality. They're away from home, they're away from their family of origin and the religious issues that may go with that. And that allows them to be more open, and that's when these issues tend to surface. So it becomes especially important for university personnel to be able to deal with these special issues. And it really comes down to a lot of basic things. LGBTQ people have more problems than other people, except in societies where they are fully integrated and fully accepted, and then their rights are no different than anyone else's. So we can see that the problem here is not with the person, but with the reaction their society has to them. So that is a problem across the board, and it has to be addressed. One of the biggest issues, of course, is the most important, and that is suicidality. The LGBTQ population faces far more issues of suicide and the risk of suicide than their cisgendered heteronormative counterparts. And it breaks down across the rainbow spectrum. Lesbians are 2 times as likely to commit suicide as their straight counterparts. Gay men are 4 times as likely to commit suicide as their counterparts. When you look at bisexuality, you add 0.9 to that figure. Bi women are 2.9 times, almost 3 times as likely to commit suicide as cisgendered heteronormative women. Gay men, bi men are 4.5 times more likely to commit suicide than their counterparts. We think that the issue with bisexuality is a lack of support, not only from society at large, but from within the gay community. A lot of people have talked in recent years about bi erasure, and this is a real thing. If you are a bisexual woman married to a man with 3 kids, is your identity as a bi woman acknowledged when you're in a monogamous relationship with a man? Another side of this is the feeling that bisexuality is a cop-out, that a person is really gay and is just saying they're bisexual because they don't want to, actually use the word gay. So that is a special trauma that is brought to bear against bi men and women. The suicide rate for trans people is 7 times the rate of their cisgendered counterparts. And something that's important to remember is that if you are transgender, that is about your gender. You can also have a sexual orientation to go on top of that. So it is perfectly possible to be a trans man who is homosexual. And isn't that the same thing as being a woman? No, it isn't. That is something entirely different. And one of the easiest ways I can explain transgenderism is to point out that sex is what happens between your legs. Gender happens between your ears. So, a lot of kids are having trouble finding out who they are and coming to terms with what's going on in their lives. And it is a difficult process. It is by no means a straight path, and they may, make pauses and pit stops and take wrong turns along the way. This is particularly true with transgender individuals because they may originally think that, I am a girl, I, was born into a female body and I like girls, so I must be a lesbian. Well, in point of fact, the problem may be that they are a male who has been born inside a female body, and that's not the same thing as being a lesbian. And a lot of people say this is all in their head, and to a certain point they're right, but something that's really remarkable and carries a lot of weight on this is the brain scans of transgender people matches the gender they identify with. The trans man scan looks like a male brain scan. The trans woman's brain scan looks like a woman's brain scan. So this isn't just a social construct that is causing them difficulties. It's a real phenomena. It has its basis inside the brain, and its structure is, impacted by it. And the best outcome for trans people seems to be, for the vast majority of them, to transition to their preferred gender. And while a long and arduous process, made more difficult by lawmakers, it nonetheless bears good results from the process of becoming your genuine self. And their issues of self-esteem, anxiety, depression, body dysmorphia go down as they take steps to start moving towards their preferred gender. And depending on when the gender dysphoria is discovered, it can have a real impact on the outcome, because if it's discovered early enough before puberty sets in, there are hormonal blockers that can stop a trans woman from going through a male puberty. And so they will not have to deal with the issues of, the broad shoulders, facial hair, enlarged Adam's apple, etc., that have to be dealt with, if they can be dealt with surgically and hormonally later. If they put them on hormone blockers until they reach the age where they can actually undergo hormone therapy, I think that's 16, 18 in some jurisdictions, then they can have a much more normative puberty to their gender identity, and that seems to improve the outcomes physically and psychologically for the transitioning process. So there are some other areas of concern that we need to be aware of. Trans people in particular are targeted right now. It used to be the LGBT community as a whole, but with marriage equality having passed, that isn't as big a hot button issue. A recent survey by Gallup stated that 70% of the population are in favor of gay marriage. And that's the first time that number's ever gotten that high. And that means there are a significant number of Republicans that also support gay marriage now, 55%, and that number has never been that high before. So LGBT issues are considerably better, but more focus has been put on trans people, and not to their benefit. Arkansas itself passed the SAFE Act, Save Adolescents from Experimentation, meaning that a doctor can face criminal charges for offering gender-affirming therapies to their clients before they reach the age of 18. Like I said, one of the most effective ways to help trans people have a good outcome is to allow them a normal for their gender puberty. And that is sadly exactly what Arkansas has interfered with. The ACLU has taken Arkansas to task and is suing to have this horrendous law overturned. But in the meantime, it's very difficult being a trans kid in Arkansas, because your doctor could go to jail for giving you the hormone blockers you need so that you don't grow breasts, so that you don't grow facial hair. And that means that you'll have a more difficult transition after it's all said and done, and you can legally start the processing, the transitional process before, despite what the legislature thinks. So that is a real problem. And with a suicide rate 7 times what it is for everyone else, trans kids are really at risk. The murder rate for trans women of color is 13 times what it is for cisgendered heteronormative people. There is far more violence against trans kids than other groups. So that is a real issue, and you have to be on the lookout to see if someone is being bullied. If there are signs, you need to intervene. The earlier you intervene, the more likely there are to be good outcomes. There was a study done that showed that having even one supportive adult in their corner that was okay with the child being gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, asexual, any of the rainbow, has a 40% impact on the suicide rate. They are 40% less likely to have suicidal ideation or other problems that are indicative to the LGBTQ population, less rates of anxiety, less rates of depression, less rates of substance abuse. So just one supportive adult. It doesn't have to be a parent, teacher, doctor, neighbor, anyone who is supportive of who they are can have a huge impact. And I think that is really where we come in. And how do you be supportive? Well, make your classrooms a safe place. Do not tolerate bigotry. Have consequences for it. And that has a big impact on the outcomes for these students. So one of the trickier bits, the part that people seem to have a problem with, is the use of pronouns. There are a lot of people who are not on the binary spectrum, trans kids being the most obvious group, but there's also gender fluid, where you feel more female one day and more male the next, and so on and so forth. And there are people who just prefer to think of themselves without a gender, and that can be difficult for a lot of people to wrap their head around. And one of the easiest ways to handle this for educational settings is to have a questionnaire at the beginning of the year. And you frequently do this in schools, tell me 3 interesting facts about you. When you do ask about pronouns, ask them, what name would you like to be called? Not what is your name, because, if they're named Anna and they're living their life as Connor, that's a world difference. And their transcripts might say Anna, but they want to be called Connor. So ask, what do you want me to call you? What pronouns do you want me to use? Can I use them in class? Can I use them communicating with parents? These are really important things, because a lot of kids come out at school before they come out at home. As strange as that sounds, but in our very disconnected lives, that's very possible to do. Their school lives may never impact their parents if there are no problems. As long as they're bringing home the grades, the parents leave them alone. So they find the school a safer place to try out their identity than at home. So having that questionnaire with those provisos, is very important. Do I use Do I call you he, him, she, her, they, them? And do I use that when corresponding with family? Big, important issue, but very easily handled. If you're not sure of someone's gender, ask them their name and then just ask them, what pronouns do you use? In this day and age, that's becoming very politically correct, and they will tell you. And some of them will, be sarcastic. My pronouns are patriot and such nonsense. I identify as an artichoke. But, just because some people make fun of it is not a reason for us to not take the issue seriously, because for part of our population, it's very serious. Gallup poll recently done show that 1 in 6 Generation Z do not identify as straight. So, and that number is rising. And this encompasses a very large spectrum of phenomena, bisexuality being the most common, but there's gender fluid, there's demisexual, there's demoromantic, a whole host of things. And I have watched people spend a lot of time and energy figuring exactly what pigeonhole they belong in. I had a group therapy session with 8 kids, all under the age of 18, and I had every single one of the kids in that group identified differently. I had a gay boy, I had a lesbian girl, I had a trans boy who was heterosexual, I had a trans boy who was gay. I had a bisexual, and I had someone who was questioning, and there was someone who identified as gender fluid. And that's 8 different things and all. And I think one of the best observations that came out of that group was I pointed out to them, y'all spend a lot of time and a lot of internet energy figuring out exactly what color of the rainbow you are, where in the spectrum you belong. But, maybe you ought to wait until you have sex to really decide that this is the entire life search. And I think that's a kind of healthy attitude. Express that their feelings are valid, even if they change their mind, 3 weeks down the road. It's valid for what they're going through right now, and they need to know that it's okay to look at these issues and explore them. This is one of the most fundamental parts of life, and it's kind of important that you get it right. So they need that freedom to be able to be a part of the community and not be judged for it. One of the most important things is never dead name a trans kid. If they have chosen a new name, never call them their birth name or their dead name. That is frequently a trigger for them. And there are some people who, because of my religious beliefs, I'm going to call you Anna. So I personally liked that kid's way of handling it. He started calling the teacher by her first name. And she was very adamant, I'm the teacher, I'm the authority figure. You refer to me as Mrs., whatever. And they said, I am a human being. I am a boy, and my name is Dave. You will call me Dave. And, they tried to play the religious card, and he'd just revert right back to calling her by her first name. So eventually he won that argument, and the teacher never fully came around, but became much more bearable as the school year went on. There were a lot of things the school district could have done to correct that behavior, but the parents weren't willing to make a big deal over it and, invite the attention to their what they felt was very private struggle. But Dave is at home struggling with what really is one of the most difficult conditions we have in our society. The success outcomes for trans kids are low if they do not have support and help. And it doesn't have to be that way. Other countries have proven that when you accept and normalize trans people, they don't have any more issues than anyone else. So, thank you, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. So that is most of what I have to say. This is a vulnerable population. It doesn't have to be. There are a few easy steps that we can take to make their lives better. Let them know you're supportive. Let them know that bullying behavior will be addressed immediately and effectively. Ask them what they want to be called. Make sure that you respect their boundaries. If they want to be Dave in your classroom, but Anna when dealing with their parents, that's a big issue, because Dave may know that in order to get his degree and get out on his own, he's got to have that degree and he's got to have parental support. So that's a really hard position to be in when you can't be your genuine self with the people who are supposed to love you the most. So LGBT people in this country have had to build families, many of them, because their own families wouldn't support them. And many an educator has been the mother or father figure to an LGBT child, and really helped them gain that support that they needed to launch themselves into the world. So I think that is one of the noblest things that we can aspire to, taking someone who's vulnerable and shielding them through that stage until they are ready to take wing and fly on their own. So that's really what I have to say. I'm more than happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Mark. We greatly appreciate it. We're giving you a virtual round of applause for
Thank you.
For your address to us. Now we will open the floor up for questions. Individuals can unmute and ask, or if you want to type them in the chat, we will read those out accordingly.
All right.
Mark,
Yes.
This is Laura Clark. I don't have my camera on. I'm off campus or on vacation, and I look like I'm on vacation as well. So I didn't want to turn on my camera.
Okay.
But I just wanted to say thank you so much. This has been extremely, although it's been short, very, very informative, and I just appreciate you spending time with us. And so I'll open it up now for questions.
Okay.
All right, Mark, we have a question in the chat. Can you share what services your organization provides?
Yes, Equality Texarkana, which is currently semi on hiatus, offers a variety of services. We are still very active where we are youth services. We run a youth support group. We have done group therapy in the past and are planning on starting that up again in the near future. We also help with advocacy. There was a wonderful case where a girl went to school and she was wearing a t-shirt that said "The Gay Agenda." Monday, gay. Tuesday, tacos. Wednesday, gay. Thursday, gay. Friday, gay. Saturday, super gay. Not what I would call, horribly controversial or offensive, unless you don't like tacos. That's one of the big things. Our CEO, Jimmy Pope, picked up the phone and called the school in question about why this child was told to turn her shirt inside out, and when she refused, she had to have her parents pick her up. And we just let them know that we felt this was homophobic and that the shirt did not violate school policies, and that we were going to support the parents fully in any kind of action they chose to bring against the school. And suddenly the child was allowed to come back to school and nothing more was said about the shirt. And she wore it back to her first day going back. Another case was a local physician refused to treat someone with HIV. They needed surgery. I think it was joint surgery of some kind. And I don't want to give up too much information because I don't want to make the doctor immediately identifiable. But they basically declined to treat them because of their HIV status. And Jimmy once again picked up the phone and just called up there and said, Dr. Watts, I'm Jimmy Pope, CEO of Quality Texarkana, and would like to discuss your treatment of this client. And I understand you have refused to treat him because he's HIV positive. And he said, that's right. He said, okay, well, we like to know these things because we will be more than happy to put it out there that you don't treat clients with HIV. And that way it will save the population that needs help and your office time and energy. Well, the doctor reconsidered quite suddenly and was more than willing to accept this client. The client declined wisely and chose another provider in Shreveport, but we have not had any more issues about that popping up. So.
All right. Thank you for that. We have a hand raised and then we'll go back to the chat. Ashley.
Okay.
Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us today. And actually, I had several questions written down and you addressed just about everything that I had written down, but I was hoping that you could talk a little bit more about the SAFE Act and more specifically sort of talk us through what gender affirmative health care for a minor actually involves at like different ages. Because in talking with people about this, I've had a lot of people say, well, I support trans people, but I don't think that a 15-year-old should be able to have gender reassignment surgery.
Right.
And so if you could just sort of talk to us a little bit about that and about what that gender affirmative health care for a minor actually looks like.
Okay. Well, one, kids figure out whether they're trans at different rates. I have met a 5-year-old who understood quite clearly that she was a girl. That was kind of mind-blowing, but yeah, this is a little girl. And so supportive parents, so on and so forth, are important, but the real things are socialization. Can the child be socialized as a girl? Girl Scouts of America are great because they are here to serve all girls. And if the little girl happens to have a penis, well, okay, this is a little girl with a penis, and she may need separate bathroom facilities, but that's okay. And they are wonderfully supportive. Now, really, when it comes down to it, and what the SAFE Act does is it prevents doctors from prescribing hormone blockers. So when a kid hits adolescence and the hormones start rollicking through and wreaking their changes, they hormonally stop them and keep them from happening. So the child remains prepubescent, continues growing, height gain, slowed down, so on and so forth. But what it does is it stops them from their bodies from morphing into something they're not. Because if you are a trans man and your body is starting to grow breast, that feels wrong. And one of the things that most clearly made me understand what was going on with the client was I had a trans boy who told me that he only showered at night because he showered in the dark. He didn't want to see his breasts at all because it just made him feel so strange and icky, because boys aren't supposed to have breasts. Showering in the dark, that's profound in how much it speaks of discomfort, the dysphoria of your body not being what it should be. Okay, so the SAFE Act says that physicians who provide hormone blockers can go to prison because they are saving our adolescents from experimentation, with the emphasis being that this is experimental in some way and dangerous. So it's very necessary for them. They need hormone blockers, they need psychological counseling, particularly with trans kids, because that is such a big thing. Well, trans people, because the transition process includes counseling. And, that is a big part of it. And we have to make sure that it isn't something else like body dysmorphia. It is possible for, well, there's a case where a girl had very large breasts, like size N. And they felt that they, wanted to be a boy. And it, in point of fact, wasn't really about wanting to be a boy as much as just not wanting to feel like a freak. And when you have, double D's in middle school, it's easy to feel like a freak. So that is one of the things that counseling is very necessary to help screen through. But surgery is not available until you're old enough to, make these kind of decisions and your parents agree with them if you're below 18. Some jurisdictions allow surgeries to start at 16. Most of them wait until 18. And if you're 16, you have to have parental involvement. So, the SAFE Act basically says that doctors can't do anything to treat gender dysphoria. And it specifically says, you know, in the act, so-called gender dysphoria. So, so yeah, basically you have to go through puberty and get into a body that does not fit you before you can do anything about it. So.
And these hormone blockers, one, aren't experimental, right? I mean, they're used if a child is going through, you know, a 5-year-old girl going through puberty too early. They're used
Yes.
in those cases as well. And they're also reversible too, right? I mean, if for some
You
reason the
stop
child, yeah,
taking them and the puberty starts right up.
yeah. And that's
And
just,
yeah. So,
yeah, I was just wanting to
but,
make sure that everyone was understanding what we were actually talking about with
right.
that.
And
So.
one important thing here is that that situation that you described when puberty is happening way too young, they can no longer treat that either. So God intended this 5-year-old girl to grow breastises. So, yeah, and that is one of the problems. And that's why the ACLU is stepping in and is fixing to beat the head about this, the state about the Head and Shoulders. So, yeah, and I think really that sort of thing has a profound impact. I run an LGBT group and it's adults. And the news that has come out on these matters has had a negative impact on, you know, these people who are in their 20s and 30s. You know, it is disheartening to feel that there are people working hard, spending your tax dollars to do this to other people who are just like you. So another one great one is there are like 29 states that have some kind of anti-trans high school sports bill. So, you know, basically, if you're a trans girl, you can't compete with the other girls because your male hormones give you an advantage. And, you know, 29 states are doing this. Do you know how many students there are in, you know, intramural sports that this applies to in the nation? 6. 29 legislatures thought it was important enough to pass laws to keep 6 kids from participating in sports. So, yeah. And part of the problem is not to throw dispersions on any particular party, but one of the great ways to get out the base is to beat the drum of if you don't get out and vote, the homos are going to be lurking around every corner waiting to seduce your sons and daughters. And that isn't working anymore. So they are demonizing trans. And that's horrible. And there are some one of the saddest cases is J.K. Rowling, who wrote the Harry Potter books, who is very gay affirming. Dumbledore is gay. That's official. That's canon. She has said it. Is very transphobic and does not believe that trans women are women. And that's sad and hurtful and has broken a lot of little Hufflepuff hearts. So that's sad. And but it's reality in the world today. And you know, when you first see someone transitioning, it's kind of hard to imagine. But after 4 or 5 years, it's very easy to imagine. And these bathroom laws are really funny because you have these lumberjacks with big old, you know, ZZ Top beards who are now required to use the ladies' room. Someone did not think this all the way through before they wrote the law. So, you know, that's a problem. Also, what woman wants to be forced to use a men's room? Really? So that's a problem. So, and a lot of people, and here's one of the things with trans people, it's a stupid little thing that you wouldn't think about in most cases, but trans people have a higher case of UTIs. Why? Because they can't find a place to pee safely. They would rather hold it till they get home than put themselves at risk of being harassed or beaten. So that's pretty sad. So.
All right, I will go to the chat and then I will come to Hollis and Haley Thompson. In the chat, the latest opinion poll on support for same-sex marriage is encouraging. However, do you think that 70% represents more viewpoints in other parts of the country? In Arkansas, would you argue the support is not as high here?
Yes, that's a good observation. Gallup is very good about leveling it out through the country, but there are pockets of acceptance and resistance. And Arkansas is not the most accepting state in the nation. It's not the worst, but it's not the best. However, Arkansas is the #1 state in the union for watching gay porn. Make of that what you will.
All right, Hollis and Haley Thompson.
Okay.
Hey, Mark. Thank you. I want to continue what everybody else said about thank you for coming and talking to us and
Yes,
about
thank you.
your advice and your perspective on this. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Here's my question. Your advice about the pronouns I found to be very good and helpful for college professors and honestly anyone in general trying to connect and show compassion to trans folk. My question is, the very first composition I ever taught back when I was a grad student, I say back, but for me, as you can see, I'm a young person only a couple of years ago.
Right.
When I taught that class, it was a freshman composition class, so one of the core curriculum, one of the very first classes students take at college. And I did do something very similar to what you suggested about asking them their preferred pronouns at the first day of class, getting their names, fun facts, all that sort of thing. And I never have done it again because what I found is it was very, very awkward for people. And I'm not sure it was even because of the political thing, but because as this was one of the first freshman classes, as you were saying, college is an area where students experiment and they tend to find their sexualities as they move on. But in that particular class, being one of the first they ever took as a freshman, starting off with that question at that point, I got the sense that that was a little bit too much for freshmen just kind of starting out on this journey. So can you speak a little bit to those of us who, especially at a community college, are teaching these very basic comp classes for students who, many of whom probably don't have that all figured out yet? How can we not make it an awkward thing and yet still?
One thing that I would suggest on that is try giving them the forms before the first day of class, if there's any way that it could be made part of the admissions process. That would probably be amazing. And you say, it's so early. I view it as so late. Why do they have to be in college before this happens? I think that high school would be a better starting point for this. And on individual basis you have to deal with it much younger. Like I said, I have met a child. When I met her, she was 7, but her mom had to come to terms with the fact that she did not have 6 sons. She had 5 sons and a daughter. And thinking about a child that young having a sexual identity is very difficult, but it's not a sexual identity, it's gender. And gender is a lot more than sex. And she came to understand that this was important to her child, and that Kai needed to be Kai. And, that was important. And once they gave in and quit fighting against their ultra conservative, highly religious views on it, Kai bloomed. And in many ways, I think the mom did too. So it needs to happen on an individualized basis for kids, but across the board, I think it needs to happen when they start in high school. But since we don't have any control over that, and that would probably require legislation, I think that part of the admissions process would be a good place to do this.
So just to be clear, I'm trying to figure out, I understand policy and all those things are really big, important issues, but for me, just, on the ground level in the classroom, I'm seeing people, I think, suggested on the chat forums, like before class, things like that. Would you suggest that that would be an easier way of doing things? Because another thing I'm concerned about is perhaps maybe students will feel awkward because they're freshmen, everything is new, and they may not want to out themselves, like, on the first day of the freshman class.
Well, they don't have to. And there should be something on this, I think, that says, if you decide you want to change your answers later, that is doable. So, because people come to these realizations when they come to them. I always loved Ellen Page, and I thought she was very brave when she came out as a lesbian. And now Ellen Page has come out as Elliot Page. And once again, this is kind of a standard thing. They kept digging into their truth till they found out what the real problem was. And gender is so fundamental. I mean, so fundamental. It's at the base of everything. And if you don't have that right, how can you have a happy outcome?
Thank you for your advice. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good. And in the chat, it does allude to asking for names and pronouns in writing or in private. And even, let's see, making those students feel comfortable that you're acknowledging and respecting them. It says even maybe the student feels comfortable coming out to you because you've shown yourself to be a safe person, and having you use their preferred pronouns one-on-one, but would prefer to not have them used in more public spaces, like in class. Good, good. And sort of, I guess, in summation, it's a learning process for everyone, having that respect for those individuals. And as we're all kind of taught at a young age, love conquers all. So you just be respectful and learn about each other and the proper nouns or pronouns or various preferences those students have. So we greatly appreciate that, Mark. Are there any other questions or comments at this time? We want to be mindful of our time as we're about to close today's lecture series.
I can't find my hand button on here. Mark, is there, I wasn't able to write down fast enough, but the questionnaire that you mentioned, making sure that is done correctly. Do you have something that maybe you could send to Dean Smith that we might consider? Just the types of questions that would be good, and then we could at least have more something that we feel like would be appropriate to look at.
Yes, I'm pretty sure I can locate something along those lines. HRC strikes me as the first place I'll look. But if nothing else, I'll draw something up and forward it to y'all. This is a little thing that can be so profoundly important for our clients. I had a client one time, he's trans, and I just told my staff, this person wishes to be called, Dave, and, please, he, him, and sir. And when Dave came back to group, it was like, oh my God, your secretary said yes, sir, to me. And it was just like the most wonderful thing to hear. Thank you for telling them that. And Dave is very early in his transitioning process. And right now, there's not anyone that's going to mistake Dave for a dude physically. But that tiny point of validation was really important to him. So yeah, I've seen the impact.
That is great. Well, Mark, on behalf of UAHT and the Chancellor's Task Force on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, we greatly appreciate you. I would be remiss without acknowledging our Interim Chancellor, Laura Clark, who joined us while on vacation. And I would also like to recognize Jolene Cook for recommending Equality Texarkana, and for Dr. Ashley Dykes for connecting with you, Mark. So without all those individuals involved within the task force and our interim chancellor and Dr. Dykes, this wouldn't be possible. And to you, the audience, we greatly appreciate you all for attending and being willing to learn and grow as we continue to move UAHT forward. So thank you, everyone, and we hope you have a great rest of the day. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.